Welcome to me, where suspenseful, thrilling, and mysterious stories will draw you into a world where the lines between reality and fantasy seem to blur. When the night falls, when all the sounds gradually quiet down, leaving only your own heartbeat and breathing, that's when these stories begin. Tensions, unsolved mysteries, moments that will make you hold your breath in fear or curiosity, all are waiting for you ahead. Find a comfortable seat, dim the lights, and let this sound guide you on a journey that is not for the faint of heart. I want each of you to leave a comment sharing where you are in the world. And if you are enjoying the episodes, don't forget to give a like and subscribe to the channel now. Relax. Are you ready? If so, join me in the first story right now. When the world went gray. Joy, happiness, life, creation, the spark of beginning, the heartbeat of Earth itself, the endless manifestation of color and beauty and light, blossoming, growing, unfurling into something infinite. And then, one day, nothing. The world, once bursting with radiance, was swallowed whole, devoured by an oblivion so complete that even memory faded to grayscale, leaving behind only the cruel, inescapable taunt of black and white, a silent mockery of what once was, shadows of what had been clung to the charred land beyond our shelter, reaching with desperate fingers toward a sky that had long since turned its back. And as the relentless nothingness took and took and took, we were left only to bear witness, to suffer in the empty remains of what we had destroyed. And as the world faded to monochrome, I became one of the countless shades of despair. Our city, once flooded with bustling citizens driving cars of every color, is reduced skeletal frames of buildings and cracked roads. A cruel reminder of the countless nights I spent, sleepless, hidden away in my attic, thriving off the colors coating my paint palette. The word around us hasn't just been burned, it's been erased, the vibrancy stripped away. I look around our underground shelter, and for people struggling to survive, everyone was perfectly content with making conversation from the concrete where they sat, as if they weren't on their deathbeds. We scrape by with the rations the leaders distribute weekly, our bodies weakened by hunger, our minds fractured by the unbearable monotony of a world without color. But it isn't the hunger or paranoia that haunts us, but the weight of absence, the memories of color fading with each passing, dissolving to add to the torture of the ash flakes contaminating the air. Black, white, gray, repeat, every damn time. And then I find myself thinking the same, though I thought, since the day the world was drained of color. This is a dream. Colors can't just disappear. And yet, here we were, in this mere sketch of what was. A vast land that stretched on through the remains of the nuclear tragedy, colored in shades of ash and bone, where nothing grows and nothing dares to blossom. For now, I resort to my only escape, my eyelids suddenly feeling too heavy, my mind too weary. Symptoms we've long since accepted as the norm, and allow myself to relax against the concrete wall. Part 1. Rations are low. Too low. A small group of us was sent into the depths of our despair to scrounge together enough food to ensure our, at the least, survival. Survival doesn't always grace the entirety of our measly society, and it's unfortunate. But death, even at 17, is not an unfamiliar fate. I look out into the rubble, finally lifting my eyes from my sneakered feet for the first time since they stepped beyond the shelter's entrance. The land is silent. The only sound, the crunching of boots landing against who knows what, and the whipping wind nipped at my skin, scattering my once auburn-streaked hair across the back of my jacket. Black, white, gray. A gleam catches my eye. We're at the edge of the ruins. That's impossible. My feet are already betraying me, already venturing closer to this foreign feeling of freedom. 5 years ago was the last time I was graced with the presence of color. 5 years since the bombs. 5 years since this world was diminished to a mere grayscale. 5 years. For color to still exist would be out of the question. I track the glistening spar of hope, forcing my eyes to stay open, forcing my feet one in front of the other, until, where'd it go? I blink. Scanning the scene, my eyes dart frantically from each piece of colorless scrap to the next. Come on. Come on. Come. Nothing. The unmistakable feeling of wilted grass prickles at my knees as they hit the ground where it was. The hope of color in an achromatic world slipped through my hoary fingers like sand slipping through the grasp of the ocean spray continuously. Elara? Sienna, one of the other young scavengers, asked, kneeling down in front of me. You okay? I blink back tears I didn't know were welling, forcing composure I don't have, even as I feel the feather-light touch of Sienna's hand on my shoulder. I know I can tell Sienna the truth. She did take me in after the bombs killed my parents, but to burden her would be to break myself in the process. Yeah. My voice is breathy, as if I'm questioning my own answer, while letting the first one that comes to mind slip past my lips. If anyone is going to believe me, it's going to be her. She is the only family I have left, after all. I thought I saw color. Sienna's muted, but still striking. Once blue eyes go wide, clawing to clench onto the sliver of hope and clinging onto it like a lifeline. Anything everything. She leans closer, the shoulder-length, ashy hue filling her head, now slipping past her ear. If anyone can find it, it's you. She said it like it was the easiest thing in the world. But that was just the way Sienna made everything seem easy. Like it wasn't the sight reignites a desperate hope, a longing to believe that life, in its fullest form, is not truly gone. Part 2. I can't pretend like it didn't happen. I can't unsee it. I know it's risky. I know there are people here who need every last bit of help they can get. But if there's a better, beautifully vivid world out there, inching to be found, it needs to be found. So here I am, in the thick, inky embrace of the dead of night, my fingers curling tightly around the worn, chilled rungs of the ladder that stretches upward like a fragile, rust-bitten bridge to a world I have long since sworn, with every fiber of my being, to unravel, to tear apart piece by piece if that's what it takes, all in pursuit of that elusive, flickering glint, something small, something distant, something that once dared to catch and hold the fleeting light of a bleached and weary sun. Because if there is one truth I refuse to let slip through the cracks of time, it is that color, in all its wild, untamed brilliance, is not just an indulgence, not merely an ornament to be admired from afar, but a necessity, a lifeblood that the world not only craves, but deserves to be drenched in, to be wholly consumed by. And if it is within my grasp to bring it back, to pry it from the hands of whatever force dares to smother it, then I will chase it, seize it, and deliver it without hesitation, no matter the cost. Singed, sealed, delivered. Address: a monochrome world once called Earth. Surrounded by rubble, I step out into the spotted sky and let the chill of a rare wind smack me right in the face, a stark contrast to the warmth seeping across my chest. I shake my head at myself and how I utterly disregarded the warnings of the other survivors, and so effortlessly snuck out of the security of our shelter into the wasteland so eagerly. I glance around the land stretched out before me, waste crowding the ground and ashes polluting the air, and I swear the hues of gray, now illuminated by stars and a moon, that appeared as dots and a waning semicircle, were darker than black, everything meshing with the ink-stained sky. I will find it. I'll find it. If it kills me, I will. Then, just beyond the endless stretch of night, a shimmer, the faintest trace of warmth against the cold monotony. It's real, I murmur, though no one is around to overhear. It has to be. Part 3. I walk for hours, and it still feels like I've gone nowhere. I'm still surrounded by the gray void, still surrounded by remains of a better life, and still with the shimmering speck of hope before me, not stopping. The landscape is an endless graveyard of the past. Twisted steel, collapsed buildings, and roads that crack beneath my feet stretch on like the bones of a forgotten civilization. Everything is still. No birds cry overhead. No wind whispers through trees, because there are no trees left to whisper through. The silence is heavy, pressing against me like the weight of the sky itself. I huff, pressing my back against a crumbling door, not bothering to look at the house, but rather the swing set across the road, peering intently as it swings back and forth in the stillness of night, moved by something unseen, perhaps the ghost of the child who cherished it. A sigh slips past my lips at the tempting offer of sleep, but refusing to give in quiet yet. I push my weight forward. My feet drag, weighing me down. Black, white, gray. Repeat. It's infuriating that I can't close the distance between me and my last hope of color. My eyes snag on a reflection in the road. My pace quickens. My footfalls echo in the empty, colorless world as I near the glinting surface. A mirror, cracked, dirt-speckled, abandoned in the middle of the road, like it doesn't belong. Like nothing belongs, I slow, breathing hard. My reflection stares back at me, distorted by the fractures spider-webbing across the glass. The same dull world is behind me, the same lifeless sky above, but beneath me, just beyond the cracks, something else, green, my breath catches. A patch of grass, impossibly vivid, bleeding through the reflection as if it exists in another world, as if it's real somewhere, somehow. I step forward, heart pounding, kneeling at the mirror's edge. My fingers hover over the glass. The colors look too bright, too alive, like they'd burn if I touched them. But I don't hesitate. I kick the mirror. It shatters under my heel with a sharp, crystalline crack. Splinters of glass scatter across the road, glinting like stars in the empty light. I brace myself for something, anything. A shift in the air, a tremor in the ground, a door opening where there was none before. But when I look down, the green is gone, just shards of broken glass, catching the darkened sky in their edges. Just my own reflection, fractured into 100 jagged pieces. I lurch forward, scraping at the road where the mirror used to be. Nothing. No hidden portal. No sliver of color left behind. My hands shake. Tears, clear wetness, drip down my cheeks in slowed fashion. My breathing comes in clipped gasps. I saw it. I know I did. The wind stirs, sending a few stray fragments skittering away. I watch them disappear down the road, swallowed by the nothingness stretching endlessly ahead. And then I keep walking, pushing harder, further, relentless. Part 4. I refuse to let myself stop. I won't. I can't. Not if I want any chance at finding the color I've recklessly craved. My eyes follow the path I left in the dust, the sun rising higher in the sky. And then, thunk, the ground hits me before I can brace for it. Pain shoots through my skull in sharp, electric volts. I glance up, dazed, and see the thick trunk of the tree I just slammed into. Its rough bark pressing into my chest, pinning me to the earth. I wince, trying to push myself up, but my head swims with dizziness. The tree stands tall, towering over me like an ancient sentinel, its branches casting long shadows in the early morning light. I can feel its strength, as if it's mocking my weakness, daring me to rise again. I press my palms to the ground, leaves crunching beneath them, and accept this tree's challenge. The rough earth presses against my skin, grounding me in this moment, daring me to rise. A chill runs through my spine as I push myself up, dirt clinging to my fingertips. The air is thick, damp, charged with something unseen but undeniable. Prepared to confront the tree, I stand to my feet and ball my fists, the tension in my body coiling like a spring. I'm ready. My knuckles tighten, breath steadying, until a sharp, almost imperceptible sting pricks at my palm. Crunch. My hand flattens instinctively, fingers twitching as I feel the sensation spread. The leaves, crisp and brittle, stick to my skin like they belong there. A brief annoyance flickers through me, and I almost brush them off without a second thought, until something stops me cold. The color, not gray, not black, not the dry, lifeless husks of darkness. These leaves are green. It's faint, fading, dying, but it's there. The realization steals the breath from my lungs. Green here. Among the decay, color still exists, but it is fading. The world is not truly black and white. It is dying in slow motion. The nuclear bombs did not erase color. It severed life's connection to it, leaving only those who remember it to witness its vanishing. A smirk, one I haven't worn since the day of the bombs, breaks across my lips. It all makes sense. I have to find the color. I have to find the, what about everyone else? What about Sienna? I cut myself off, bending to gather a handful of dull leaves from the ground. Sienna would want this. If anyone can find it, it's you. My grip on the leaves tightens as if I can hold on to her words, onto her, for guidance, like I always have. And I intend to do just that. One step. For hope, another. For faith, 2 steps. For a new life, another. For Sienna, and then I'm sprinting, not daring to look back. The road to nowhere. I yawned and rubbed the sleep away from my eyes. Looking around, the flickering lights of the train windows I had gotten so used to were gone, and all I could see were the dim white lights that lined the aisle of the train car. I glanced around at all the empty seats, confused. Why was I here? Why was the train empty? And why wasn't it moving? Confusion overtook me, followed by panic. I shot to my feet and strode to the end of the train car, trying the door at the very end, but it wouldn't budge. I quickened my steps to the other side, my shoes clanking on the metal floor, and tried the sliding door. This one opened like a dream. Excitedly, I stepped out of the train car onto the solid ground I knew would be there, and promptly fell. There was no ground. There was no sky. There was just nothingness. My heart dropped into my stomach as I lurched downward, and the only thing that saved me from plummeting into that nothingness was the open backpack on my back, caught on the armrest of one of the chairs, still inside. My arms, having felt like they were wrenched from my shoulders, hung there loosely as the straps of my backpack held on to me for dear life. My breath caught in my throat, and my mind raced as I stared out at the blackness before me. How do I get up? I tried to turn to grab the floor of the train car, but a loud tearing of fabric caused me to pause, and my heart thundered in my ears. I waited, my arms refusing to move out of fear, but in one fell swoop, I launched my hands up behind me and hoisted myself back onto the floor of the train car, just as my backpack completely tore open. Panting heavily, back in the safety of the train car, I ripped my backpack off my shoulders and inspected the damage. The top was completely torn, but I didn't care. That stupid backpack saved my life. I threw it back on and stood up, staring out at the blackness before me, holding on to the armrest of a chair, just for insurance. There was literally nothing. No one. The silence was so suffocating, I almost wished to hear my heart pounding in my ears again. "Hello?" I called as loud as I could into the void, but there wasn't even an echo, just silence. Suddenly, as if compelled by some outside force, the train car lurched forward. I nearly tumbled into the void again, the only thing that saved me being that armrest I was holding. "What was that? Who's doing that?" I called, but once again, no answer. The train car chugged along slowly, almost at a snail's pace, but I figured that was better than nothing. I closed the sliding door, sick of my inability to stay firmly in the train, and walked carefully to a seat, plopping down into it. What was I doing before I got on the train? I didn't remember. Who was I? I didn't remember. It felt like I'd been created from air and dropped onto this God-forsaken train, surrounded by this God-forsaken nothing. I took the poor, shredded backpack off my shoulders again and searched through it this time. But all I found were some loose-leaf blank sheets of notebook paper. A student, maybe? If I was stupidly disorganized. I desperately tried to search my brain for any clues related to school. Maybe the name of a school I went to, the names of past teachers, the faces of fellow students and friends. I came up with nothing. No matter how much I tried to scour my memories, one unchangeable fact remained. I was stuck on a train car in the middle of the void, heading to nowhere. All I could do was wait, so that's what I did. I waited, and I waited, and waited. I kept myself occupied with my thoughts as I stared out the window, gazing into the darkness. I don't know how much time passed. I had nothing to gauge my bearings on. No watch, no ticking clock, nothing. The dim lights from the train ceiling flickered for a moment, and then went out with a quiet click. And at the same time, the train came to an abrupt halt. I looked away from the window and shot to my feet, wrenched away from my thoughts, and pressed myself against the train wall. I could barely see anything. The dim lights were the only light source in this never-ending blackness. "Hello?" I called out, but my voice broke in my nervousness. There was a small beep, like something about to be announced over an intercom. And all of a sudden, a digital message began scrolling across the top of the train wall in bright red digital letters. Suddenly, as if compelled by some outside force, the train car lurched forward. The train started moving again, abruptly, the force almost yanking me off my feet, and I steadied myself before looking back at the digital red letters. Who's doing this? Who is it? My frustration and stress exploded into my voice, and I stomped angrily away from the wall to stand in the center of the slow-moving train car, bathed by the weak red light of the letters. The digital message continued scrolling, and the letters would reveal a message that would make me rush towards the seats. The train started moving again abruptly, the force almost yanking me off my feet. I didn't catch the rest, desperate to get to a seat. The train did, in fact, start moving forward again. And it was only by the grace of God that I ended up grabbing the armrest of a seat to avoid flying to the floor. Angrily, I stormed to the end of the train and yanked open the sliding door, screaming into the void. "Are you messing with me? What are you trying to do? Why am I here?" I glanced back at the red letters on a whim and saw the following message. The silence was so suffocating, I almost wished to hear my heart pounding in my ears again. Nothing. absolute silence. And the last thing I saw before tumbling out of the train and into the void were the small red letters forming the words, "There was no ground, there was no sky, good luck, in flight, meal." Leo was not a fan of flying. Not like this, sitting quietly with strangers in an enclosed space, like he was back in the classroom. That was one of his ideas of hell. He had many ideas of hell, and very few of heaven. He made sure her was one of the first passengers on the plane. He took his seat with no fuss and no nonsense, and then did his best to weather the storm of humanity around him. He tried the breathing technique his therapist had taught him, and he also tried zoning out. Neither worked. A voice in his head was screaming at him to leave. Anything was better than this. Screw the deal. Just get off the plane and go home. Maybe Jimmy was right. They should buy the Vibe Bar, change its name to something far cooler, and live the simple life. Leo's Bar. Thoughts of the bar helped calm him for a little while, but then he realized that his ambition was taking the concept to places that were far from simple. Leo sighed. Jimmy would make that bar work. He really would. But then Leo would come along, interfere, and fuck it up. And the worst of it was that Jimmy would smile sweetly and let him ruin everything. Sometimes Leo wondered whether he wasn't wired right, that maybe he'd been dropped on his head as a baby, or his mother had had a secret drug habit. Leo was never settled or content. Nothing was ever good enough. Or if it seemed like it was, it soon turned into the brown stuff and stunk to high heaven, meaning Leo had to move onto pastures new before the shit stuck to him, and he was the one stinking the place up. Somehow, he lost himself somewhere in his thoughts and self-absorption, thankful of the respite. Barely taking in the safety briefing, he came to himself as the plane accelerated down the runway, and he was pressed down into his seat as they traveled skyward. He enjoyed this bit, but it also terrified him. There was nothing natural about being propelled into the sky. He tried not to consider the landing. It was the landing that could kill you. Hit the ground hard enough, and it was all over. He blew out a breath and closed his eyes. He kept them closed as he mulled the deal. This was the big time. Once he'd done this deal, he'd be a different animal, and the Vibe Bar would be far beneath him. He was a player now. Things were on the change, and people better take note. They would have to take note. He'd make sure of it. "Drink, sir?" The question fazed him, but he quickly returned to himself, ordering a bourbon, then making it a double. As he poured his drink into the crappy plastic cup, he tuned into the interaction between the air hostess and the passenger sat next to him. The voice was what caught his attention. There was no mistaking the owner of that voice. If Leo were to turn and gawp at the woman next to him, he knew that he would find her attractive. Maybe too attractive. Leo's measure of too attractive was not misogynistic. He applied the same rule to man and beast alike. Beautiful people could be really up themselves and manage to be a pain in the ass at the same time. Leo had experienced this and had no time for it. Mostly, he had no time for it. There was always room for exceptions, and she turned out to be yet another of the exceptions. "Hey," he said, as he turned to greet her. "I'm Leo." She smiled and nodded. "I'm Grace. Nice name," he told her. And for once, he thought he might mean it. There followed a silence that could have been awkward, but instead was filled with anticipation, or at least was as far as Leo was concerned. "I don't usually," he began, but trailed off as both the words and the sentiment felt off kilter. "I bet that's what you say to all the girls you sit next to on a plane," she said, with a hint of humor in her voice. That voice, there was something cathartic about it. Not only that, her very presence was doing something to him. Some things. He was regressing. A young boy around the babysitter. A pretender to a throne he never thought he would ever sit on. His body was fizzing, and his brain was spinning, so that he couldn't think straight. "So Leo," she said, "what is it that you do?" That last word was heavy with meaning, but he could not discern it. "I'm a businessman," he replied. "The problem with the dog-eat-dog world of business is you have to piss a few people to get anywhere. Am I right?" She was smiling. He nodded. "Seemed impossible not to. Trick is not to piss the wrong people off," she said in a quieter tone. Leo paused for a moment, his face a question. It were almost as though she knew something that he didn't. But how could she? She was just a stranger on a plane, and this was small talk to pass the time as they lingered in the limbo of this uncomfortable travel. Then she casually placed her hand on his thigh, and everything took a sharp right turn. "I find flying so dull." Now she was barely whispering. "Don't you?" "Not so much so now," Leo replied. Grace grinned at him. There was something overtly sexy about that grin. It sent a thrill up Leo's spine. The sensation was heightened as Grace's hand stroked higher up his thigh, and he found himself wanting more, wanting so much more. "Your business?" she asked, her voice stroking the back of his neck in time with her hand on his thigh. "Is it dangerous?" "Very." His own voice felt thick and stilted. He was inexplicably drowsy, but his senses felt heightened. Her touch was electrifying him. "I walk on the wild side." He wasn't sure why he'd told her that. Wild side? They weren't even his own worlds. "I knew it!" she said excitedly. her hand going all the way up his inner thigh and resting exactly where he had hoped it might. "You're a very naughty man, aren't you?" Naughty? Was he? If anyone else had asked him this question, he'd have put them in their place. But with her, it was different. It was like she was royalty, a bona fide princess, the sort you couldn't refuse. And he wasn't going to refuse her when she was working magic on him with that hand of hers. Couldn't react badly with where her hand was right now. "I have been known to be naughty." He struggled to say the words as an involuntary gasp threatened to intermingle with them. "In that case, I think you better ask for a blanket." Grace gave him a playful squeeze. She was leaning in towards Leo now. He felt her breath on his earlobe and neck. "Sure," he said, and duly obliged. "That's better," purred Grace as she spread the blanket over Leo. The armrest was up and out of the way now. "This business of yours, it's criminal, isn't it?" "Can be," Leo replied, as Grace moved closer to him and nuzzled his neck, sending waves of pleasure through him. The anticipation was building, and he was reeling from this turn of events. He was no longer enduring a painful flight. He was enjoying a mile-high tryst. "Oh, look, you're bleeding." Her words took too long to sink in. He responded instead to her hand, leaving him and taking his wrist instead. There was a smear of blood, but he hadn't noticed any pain or act that could have caused the slight wound. "Here, let me." He watched as she lapped at the bloodied skin on his wrist. However slow he'd been with what she'd been saying, his body responded quickly and fully to this. She was sending waves of pleasure through him, and his imagination was going to the best of places, even before she began kissing and then sucking at his flesh. He'd never known pleasure like it, never realized how sensitive his wrists were. They sat like that for a while, Grace lapping and kissing him as he looked on, Leo doing his best to stifle his moans and hold himself back. The way he was responding to her, it was like his first time, but he had decades of experience to bring to the party. Something so simple as kissing his wrist. Who knew? And if she could have this effect on him as she did this, what further pleasures awaited? He was disappointed when she stopped, resisting the urge to ask her not to cease, putting a hold on begging her for more. Instead, he went for small talk to disguise his blatant need for her. "What do you do, Grace?" he asked, as she slipped her arm around him and drew closer to him. Her hand was wrapped around him now. It felt so good. He barely registered her having undone his belt and trousers, losing his touch, drowning out the dissenting thoughts, going with it. He'd seen plenty of action before today, but not like this, not with a woman like Grace. and she was doing things to him that he didn't know were possible. He wanted her more than any woman he'd ever met, wanted to give himself over to the pleasure he knew she could so readily bestow. Her voice, her presence, it had spoken of this, drawn him in. Now she was fulfilling the promise that was made as soon as they'd taken their seats on this flight. A chance encounter that was blowing his mind to pieces as she stroked him and pleasured him. She answered his question with that voice of hers. I deal with the naughty boys. I eliminate risks, she breathed into his ear. And you've been a very naughty boy. Fran Johnstone is not happy with you going behind his back with this deal of yours. His eyes widened in shock, but he barely had time to let the words sink in before her teeth sank into his neck. His back arched, and he wanted to protest, to struggle, but it was already too late for that. Too late for Leo. Grace took her time and enjoyed her in-flight well. These business trips were very lucrative for an assassin with her skills and proclivities. Less so for loose cannons like Leo. It's only the beginning of trouble. As I sit on the uncomfortable train seat, blankly staring out of the window, I feel the heat wash over me in an instant. Breath 1, breath 2, breath 3. It's okay. I can do this. Trying to stay calm and relaxed, I look away from the window, starting to feel dizzy from the speed we pass the trees with. You've done this before, I say to myself as a pep talk. Just because it's different setting doesn't mean you can't do it. There is only one problem. If it goes south, I won't be able to escape for another 3 hours of that train ride. I have to execute the plan perfectly to the last step to make sure I will get away with it. In moments like this, I swear at myself for choosing to do that specific line of work. I'm still a beginner. I am still nervous and anxious about the jobs, even though my mentor tries to convince me it will get easier and more natural. I let out a huff and smile at that thought. What a messed up world it is to get used to doing something so awful. I personally don't have a choice. I need to do this and clear the society from disgusting and horrible people. My eyes travel down to my backpack, trembling slightly from the train movements, filled with the tools I will need for this specific job. The top zip is open, and the sun faintly glints in body of the syringe I brought, the tool for Plan A. If all goes well, I won't have to travel too far down the alphabet to finish the job. But I prepared myself for many possibilities and outcomes. I push my head back onto the headrest and close my eyes, breathing in the dusty smell of the carriage. A quiet conversation of the couple 2 rows ahead of me reaches my ears, and I focus on their words, to calm my nerves. It's hard to tell what the topic of their exchange is. All I can make out from it are words like secret, promise, disaster, and truth. The nosy part of me wants to move closer and listen in, but the rational part of me rejects the idea, bringing my focus back to my assignment. I should not distract myself with anything until the job is done and I can get off the train. My phone buzzes in my pocket, and I take it out to see my mentor's name on the screen. Yes, I answer quietly, looking around for any other passengers that could be in the earshot. What's the update? His low and raspy voice sounds in my ear, and a shiver travels down my spine. I will approach the target in 8 minutes, I reply, and saying it out loud must activate some more anxiety in me, because my leg starts bouncing and fingers start fidgeting with the seam of my jeans. Keep me in the loop, he says, and hangs up. I take one last deep breath and stand up, grabbing my backpack and closing the zip. Here we go. Slowly, I make my way towards the front carriage. The first class one I don't have a ticket for. You have to be confident when walking past, but not too confident. It brings attention. Easy. I enter the carriage and quickly scan the faces I can see for my target. I notice him at the table the furthest away from me, so deeply interested in whatever he is typing on the laptop that I can sense it will be easy to execute my plan A. He has got gray hair with some black streaks still running through. The suit he is wearing looks expensive, perfectly tailored to his broad shoulders, but slim figure. He has got a clean shave, but the eyebrows he is furrowing are thick and badly unshaped. Luckily, he looks exactly like the picture I was given. The fact that he has a laptop on the table and a drink next to it is a slight inconvenience. I wouldn't want to damage his laptop in the first part of the process, as he may not be as forgiving for me to move to the second stage of the plan. My movements have to be even more careful now. I cannot afford to make a mistake here. I shuffle my backpack and tilt it to the right side, which is where the tables are. As I slowly make my way towards the end of the carriage, I intensely calculate the angle I have to use to not cause too much trouble. My target's laptop is by the window side of the table, as is he, still furiously typing on the keyboard. His wine glass is placed to his right, almost at the edge of the table, which means my best move is to knock it away from him and his laptop. I swallow hard, take another deep breath, and head to the door that lead to the next carriage. As I am about to open it, I turn to my right and push his glass off the table. Oh my goodness, I am so incredibly sorry, sir, I say nervously, trying to keep my voice slightly higher pitched than my natural one. and I take some tissues out of the side pocket of my backpack. He swears and closes his laptop. How the hell can you be so clumsy? He's angry. I can hear it in his voice. It must have been a nice glass of wine. But then he looks at me, the low cleavage of my blouse, the long and wavy brown hair barely covering anything, and he smiles. The frustration from his face is gone. Sir, please, I will buy you a new drink, I promise. I mumble, still pretending to be stressed over this situation. Ah, darling, please don't worry. It's just a liquid. When I'm done wiping off the seat opposite him, I throw the tissues in the bin and head for the bar, leaving my backpack innocently on the seat by the window. As I walk away, I make sure to swing my hips with the movement to attract more of his attention. With the wine replacement in my hand, I walk back to the table and smile innocently at my target. He smiles back at me, probably thinking he got lucky I came across him. I know what he does when no one is looking, to what atrocities he lowers himself when he is not pretending to be a highly respected businessman. And I also know that my silly outfit and clumsiness made him incredibly happy. Wipe this smile off your face, you monster. You have no idea what's coming. I sit on the bench I just wiped off and push my backpack under the table, right by my legs. My name is Cassie, I say, and gently bat my eyelashes at him. I hope I didn't spill any wine on your gorgeous suit or very expensive-looking laptop. I chuckle nervously, waiting for his reaction. Well, Cassie, I think you just got lucky. Nothing seems to be damaged. I look at the table behind the laptop. Actually, there may be a little left here. Please, let me... I lean to my backpack under the pretense to get the tissues, and with them, I take out the syringe and place it on my lap. After wiping the invisible stain off the table, I smile at my target again. Thank you for being so understanding. Of course. Before he says anything else, I stab his thigh with my unassuming weapon, and his eyes open wide. What did you just do? Shh, I say in my normal voice, and watch him slowly drift away. Have a nap, sir. The mysterious painting. After pushing back from its gate, the Swiss Air midday flight to New York moved slowly through a light snow flurry to its designated runway. The first-class cabin was less than half full. The passenger in 1A was pleased there was no one opposite. A smiling cabin crew offered him a glass of champagne. He declined, asking for double single malt. He thought about the voicemail, a somewhat guarded call, coming from someone he hadn't spoken to in 15 years. What drove his final response was the email attachment that followed. He'd tried retuning the call, but it went to voicemail. He sensed something was wrong. He'd barely had time to return to his apartment from where he'd been staying, find his passport, pack a new bag, and take his car service to the airport. Something was telling him Missing the flight was not an option. Philippe Abano was an internationally recognized art specialist, having spent 35 years researching the French Impressionists, a group of artists whose collective works, long after their passing, at auction, would shake the art world to its foundations. As with many famous artists, there were finished canvases, although documented, which had never been located. The Nazi art plunder, which began in Germany in 1933, contributed to the loss of artworks across Europe. The French Impressionists were not exempt from this pillage. 48 hours previous, Marie Le Pen was an art restorer. She worked almost exclusively for the Metropolitan Museum of Art, specializing in the restoration of damaged watercolors. On occasion, she did private restoration. With the museum's knowledge, she'd taken a call from a person representing a Mr. Retzlaff, saying she'd been recommended by her superior at the museum as someone to inspect a damaged watercolor he possessed. Marie, who loved her work, agreed to view the painting. She agreed a time the following day. Mr. Retzlaff would send a car. Very swish, she thought. After offloading her bags from the limousine sent for her, she looked around. The street was amazing. Narrow with private residences, no commercial properties. The houses all appeared to be of similar build, 5 or 6 floors above ground, with basements or walk-downs. Every property was maintained like new. Flowers and trees adorned the street. There was no garbage and no graffiti. The residence they stopped in front of was impressive, with red brick and huge floor-to-ceiling windows, edged with carved stone. At roof level, gargoyles peered down, surveying the scene. This was a part of New York most people would never see. Amazing. She followed the driver up the marble steps. He pulled on the brass handle and returned to the car. A man wearing a bow tie and black trousers answered. "Yes, madam?" he inquired. "I'm Marie Le Pen. I believe you're expecting me?" She smiled. "We are indeed, madam," the stern-faced man replied. The entrance hall was huge. She could smell timber and brass polish. The black and white checkered tiled floor was straight out of an English TV series. The doors leading off the foyer were all closed. A majestic, sweeping staircase held sway over the entrance. Huge brass vases, once filled with flowers, stood empty either side of the entrance. Apart from the electric light, the only modern consideration was a mechanical elevator. "Please," the man gestured, "follow me." They entered the elevator, along with her baggage. Marie watched as the man pressed 5. The door closed, and they began their ascent. On the 5th floor was another vestibule. This one had more polished timber and huge windows onto the street below. "This way." He gestured, then walked along a long corridor before he opened a large double door into what looked like a series of smaller spaces. If Marie hadn't had complete faith in her boss, she'd have been scared. At one side of the room, A man sat, straight-backed, with silver-gray hair. She guessed at least late 80s, wearing a green corduroy smoking jacket. He stood. She could smell cigar smoke. "Thank you for coming. I'm Peter Retzlaff. Fact is, Miss Le Pen, I need an expert opinion as to a certain painting that is in my possession. Should I, or should I not, restore it? Your superior at the Met spoke most highly of you." Marie saw several large art tables, specialist seats, and an array of instruments, all designed specifically for art restoration. She was gobsmacked. There had to be $1 million in equipment and instruments, brand new, some still in their original packaging, just sitting there. The old man waved his hand, and the valet unlocked a large steel cabinet with racks of what looked to Maria like canvases, painted canvases, in various stages of decomposition. Strange, she thought. He slid one of the racks out and removed a painting, a watercolor that Maria recognized. After putting on her smock and gloves, examined the item more closely. Behind her, a phone rang. The valet took a cell phone from his pocket and listened, then said something softly to the old man. They steeped away to the side of the room, out of earshot. Maria continued looking at the canvas, heavily water damaged with a once grand frame that also appeared flawed. She was about to make some preliminary notes into her phone. As she moved around the table, a splash of red caught her eye. The steel cabinet, which held the damaged painting, was open on one side. What she saw made her heart stand still. It was a large canvas of what appeared to be small wooden bridge over water in a garden. Although no expert, she'd seen enough examples of French impressionistic work to know this could be one. Marie quickly turned her phone to camera, taking 2 quick shots, only to be interrupted by raised voices. The old man was saying something to the valet in what sounded like German, who dashed past her, securing the door to the cabinet, ending her view. She said nothing, returning to the recorder in her phone, her head down, trying to appear as though she was concentrating. The old man looked suspiciously at her, said nothing. She could feel his eyes. "My God, what have you just seen?" she asked herself. Maria spent the next 2 hours making notes and photographing the damage. She agreed to return the following day with her recommendations and estimates, should she consider it restorable. Retzlaff agreed, giving her a copy of a providence document relating to the painting, which she would need to study. He told her he would send a car for her at an agreed time. She shook his hand and returned to the waiting limousine. The previous 2 hours did not sit well with her. Quite why, she couldn't say. The images of the red canvas wouldn't leave her. The storm had hit with a vengeance. Sudden spring rain washing the roadways, reminding New Yorkers summer was not far away. The crowded eateries on the streets of the East Village were suddenly deserted, sending outside diners scrambling for shelter inside. From her small, single-bed apartment off McDougal Street, above a drugstore, Maria sat looking at the 2 images she'd downloaded from her camera. The room was quiet, save for the rhythm of the rain tapping at her window. On the larger screen, she could see more clearly the image she'd snapped earlier. The images were very much French impressionistic, of the late 19th or early 20th century. She could see the attempt to produce work inspired by real life. It was revolutionary. French impressionist artists rejected classical subject matter in favor of modernity, seeking to produce works that represented their current circumstances and environments. The more she looked, the more she was convinced. It was what she suspected. "My God," she exclaimed. "Could it be a Monet, hidden in a steel cabinet in a residence on the Upper West Side?" It would explain the old man's annoyance at the cabinet being left open, particularly in the presence of a third party who just happened to be an art restoration expert. Maria took stock, pouring another glass of wine, wondering what she should do next. She thought about the man who had mentored her 15 years ago at Switzerland's largest art museum, the Kunsthaus Zurich, Philippe Abano. If anyone could make sense on what she had seen, he could. She'd not had any contact with Philippe for over a decade. Now he worked in a private capacity, advising galleries and writing books on the subject of French art, in particular, French Impressionism. His web page provided email and phone contact details. Maria thought carefully as how she should frame the call without identifying the object. Before she made the call, she uploaded the 2 photographs into a separate folder, attaching it to the email address she had for Felipe Abano. Suspecting the call would go to voicemail, she'd prepared a statement. At 10:30 p.m., she made the call, voicemail. She introduced herself, telling him of her current position at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, reminding him of their previous association, how she'd come to see what she'd seen, making no reference to a place or names, asking him for his opinion as to the images attached to the following email. Finishing the call, she pressed the send button. In the street below, a man sat in a black limousine, its wipers on intermittent sweeps, clearing the spitting rain, watching the illuminated small window above the drugstore. The Swiss Air flight gathered speed as it approached its takeoff point at Zurich Airport. Food and service trolleys rattled in their compartments as the aircraft's nose finally lifted into a gray, overcast day, the engines screaming. Philippe Abano was anxious and at the same time nervous, processing what he'd heard and seen in the previous few hours from one Maria Le Pen. Once the pilot had removed the seatbelt sign, he reached for his laptop. Putting on his glasses, began his search. East Village, New York City, detectives, Allison Maroney and her partner, Alex Sonny, stood at the open door of 1A, the apartment above the drugstore in the East Village. They flashed their shields at the uniform on the door. "What we got?" Allison inquired. The uniformed officers' badges read Lomax. "So, Officer Lomax, talk to us." The officer opened his notebook. "A deceased female found dead after we gained entry, possible gunshot. A Miss Holland." He gestured upwards. "In 2A, reported a cat calling and scratching at the deceased's door. Apparently, the tenant regularly let her cat out when she came home from work, and then opened up when Pussy wanted in. Except, this time, no response. Cat keeps calling. She, Miss Holland, knocked. Nothing. As she heard the tenant arrive earlier that evening, she was reluctant to use the spare key she had, deciding to call 911 instead. We attended. The cat was still scratching at the door. Miss Holland gave us the key and witnessed a non-forced entry. We discovered the body and called the station, securing the scene. The ME, who arrived shortly after we called it in, puts time of death at around 8 p.m., give or take. Pulling on latex gloves, Detective Maroney knelt next to the body. ID? Yes. A wallet with cash and cards. A Maria Le Pen, 37, works at the Metropolitan Museum as an art restorer. ID shows her address as here. No driver's license. Detective Sonny moved carefully around the small room. Laptop? Cell? Neither, though I'm guessing she had both. They're chargers for each in here and in the bedroom. To recap, Sonny offers. No phone, no laptop, nothing taken except said cell and computer. Not a robbery then, and no sign of a forced entry. Sonny looked at his partner skeptically, shrugging his huge shoulders. Single gunshot between the eyes, small caliber, maybe .22. Very professional. This look like a hit to me, Maroney offered. What do you think? After 3 hours of intense in-flight investigation, Philippe Abanot concluded it was a work by Claude Monet, albeit a later work. His once subtle transitions between shades became bolder and less precise, reflecting the challenges posed by his deteriorating eyesight. Monet's health struggles extended beyond his eyes, but his vision loss had the most direct impact on his art. And it was this Philippe Abanot recognized. He'd even found a reference to a non-catalogued work titled Pont sur l'eau bleue, Bridge over Blue Water. It was listed as one of several, being prepared by Monet's agent for exhibit in Paris. The exhibition never eventuated, the listed paintings unaccounted for. This was no great mystery for Armand. A number of explanations could be found. The artist withdrew the works, no reason given, an issue with the gallery, or sold before exhibition, The latter Armand found more convincing. It would also explain its anonymity for over a century, a private or family collection that may have suffered at the hands of the Nazi art plunder of the 30s. The whereabouts of many were still unknown. Either way, a mystery that may well be explained when he was to meet with Maria Le Pen in 4 hours' time. The trip of a lifetime. The trees are so much bigger out here, I said, as I looked out the passenger side car window. We were driving from the airport in the cab we just got. The lady driving was rude. She barely even looked at us. But we're out of there, and officially on vacation. The flight was long. I tried to sleep, but the man next to me was a talker. I'm too nice, my girlfriend says, but that's what keeps the world a better place. Besides, the man kept buying me drinks, which is why I'm looking out the window. I might hurl, "And greener. This place is beautiful," says Kenny. We're finally in the Pacific Northwest. Our bags are packed, and we're headed to Mount Hood. We have a week out here, and 4 days spent in the mountains. Kenny has family out here, so we're staying with his aunt the first night. And then we're off to breathe that crisp forest air. We made it to his aunt's house. She was so warm and welcoming. I felt right at home. After a nice meal of homemade beef stew and a shower, I was ready for bed. I bid them good night, and off I went, fast asleep in no time. I woke up in a panic. The room unfamiliar. Where am I? I thought, as my senses start to adjust. There's a soft buzzing coming from the fluorescent lights above me. My arms and legs are secured to this hospital bed, it seems. But this doesn't feel like a hospital. It's too cold. I try to move my head, but that's secured too. "Hello?" I call, but no answer. "Hello." Again silence. Suddenly a man is standing above me. He covers my mouth as I go to scream once more. "Shut up! They'll know you're awake. And then they'll make you forget. You mustn't forget. It's not safe. Run!" Something pokes me, and I'm out again. I awake in bed, extremely well rested. It's 6:00 a.m. What a crazy dream, I thought, as I smelt the coffee. I jump out of bed and run to the kitchen, where Kenny's Aunt Gloria is standing in her long silk lavender-colored nightgown and matching slippers. She seems so frail, yet strong and intimidating at the same time. A soft smile forms as she bids me good morning. "Ken's not up yet, but you're more than welcome to join me for some bean water," she says with a chuckle. I follow her outside to the patio. The air is fresh and moist, the coffee warm and delicious. You can see the sun glisten off the morning dew as the birds sing their welcome to the day. "It sure is nice of you to let us stay here," I say. Kenny and I have been planning this trip for a while now, and I am so excited it's finally happening. You two boys, be careful out there. I hear stories all the time about hikers going missing in those woods. These aren't like the mountains you have on the East Coast. These are real mountains, inhabited by really big creatures. I'm sure you've heard of Bigfoot. She says. I chuckle. Ha, Bigfoot, please. He's just a myth. If Bigfoot is real, then I hope I see him. He'll take a photo and become rich. Gloria shook her head and looked deep into her coffee, almost as if she was trying to see the bottom of her cup through the black liquid it now held. Like I said, just be careful, please. It's now 10 a.m., and we are on our way to the mountain. Gloria let us use her car since she doesn't drive anymore. She's 75 now, and hasn't driven since she was 70, and got lost driving home. They found her a day later, parked in a parking area 15 miles from the house. We made it to the mountain after about 2 hours of driving, and we couldn't wait to get on the trail. As we loaded up our packs, Kenny and I discussed our route, where we would stop for water and lunch breaks, where we would camp, and which streams we will pass, so we know where to collect water when we get low. All said and done, the trail up and down the mountain shouldn't take more than 3 days, but we're taking it slow since we haven't done a mountain of this caliber before, so we planned for 4 days. We're hiking Timberline Trail. It passes 3 major landmarks and has snow runoff year-round, so finding water shouldn't be a problem. In total, it's just over 41 miles. We're all loaded up and ready to start our hike when I realize I left my trekking poles at the airport. They must have fallen out of my pack. Just find a stick on the hike. It'll serve the same purpose, says Kenny. I mock him, but I know that's what will happen. Easy for you to say. You didn't forget anything, but he did. The compass. Well, how are we supposed to know where we're going now? I ask. We still have a map, and the trails are marked. It'll be fine, he says in a not-so-reassuring voice. We've been walking for hours, and I haven't seen a single soul. It's day 2 in the woods. The first day went by so fast, but now the excitement and newness has worn off. The woods are long and damp, flora as far as the eye can see. No roads, cars, people. Hey, are we on the right path? I ask. Yeah, we should be coming up on Cloud Cap in about 5 more miles. Ken responds. I don't believe him, though, and my body hurts. It must be from sleeping on the ground. And I kept having the dream about the guy telling me to run. Maybe that's just making me paranoid. There, see? I told you we're going the right way. That must be Cloud Cap Inn, exclaimed Ken. As I stumbled over the hill, I saw what appeared to me as an abandoned shack in the middle of the forest. "I don't think that's it," I yell, but Ken was already sprinting towards the front door. "I call first shower," he yells as he enters the doors. I approach the building cautiously, examining the weathered cedar shakes, the broken shutters hanging from the windows. How is this place still in business? I thought. I push open the heavy oak door, and inside, the place looks immaculate. It's an open floor plan with 2 massive fireplaces at either side of the room. The carpet covers the hardwood floor, and drapes cover the windows. I look to the front desk. It's the man from my dream. "I told you to run," he says as a loud bang comes from the room upstairs. Kenny screams, "Bang!" Then silence. I run as fast as I can up the stairs, skipping 4 steps at a time. I take a left. The hallway goes on forever. Which room did it come from? "Kenny!" I yell as I'm racing down the hallway. I hear no response. "Kenny!" Again, nothing. I ran downstairs, and there's no one around. The doors are locked, and I can't get out. I try for a window, but they're boarded up from the inside. I ran back upstairs and tried those windows, but to no avail. I'm trapped. But how? Why? Just as I ask this, I hear a noise coming from the stairs. I turn around, and there I see it. Kenny's body, 2 gunshot wounds. "It must feed," says a voice from the other end of the room. I turn to look. "Gloria?" Bang. My knee is on fire. I cry out in pain as the creature appears. I look into its bright yellow eyes, soulless and empty. Its teeth big and sharp. Lips stained with blood. "Why Gloria?" "Because I love him," she says, as she points the gun straight at me. "And he loves me." Bang! I fall to the ground. The world seems blurry. I see the smoke coming from the barrel of the Smith & Wesson. I see Kenny stand and take the gun from his aunt. Just as my eyes close for the final time, I should have ran. The end. The night the engines died. The passengers of Flight 227 had just completed their meal. The cabin buzzed quietly with the clinking of silverware, an intermittent laugh, and the faint sound of rustling newspapers. Ordinary, routine sounds that masked behind the fragile facade of safety, the horror that loomed just beyond. A stewardess laughed at a joke told by a passenger. A man in first class swirled his wine, enjoying the final sip. Suddenly, the intercom crackled to life, its static sibilant as a snake wrapping its way around the unwitting passengers. Then the voice, calm, deliberate, but with an unnatural solemnity, as if the captain was reading his own obituary. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking." A moment of silence, just enough time for apprehension to germinate. "I need to inform you of an issue." The words hung in the air, like an executioner's blade, poised to drop. The atmosphere changed instantly, as though an unseen presence had blown a chilly breath over the cabin, permeating every crack and crevice, wrapping around each traveler like invisible fingers clenching into a fist. Talk stalled, laughter died, to be succeeded by tense silence, as though the whole aircraft had sucked in its communal breath. The pilot went on, his voice strained with shame, but shaking under the burden of the nightmare he had created. "In my hurry to leave Charles de Gaulle Airport, I failed to adequately monitor our fuel levels." A long, ragged pause ripped through the intercom, as though he was fighting to get out the words. "I am ashamed to say this. I know I have let you all down." A hollow, uncomfortable silence fell over the cabin, choking the air like an invisible hand squeezing against each chest. The pilot paused to catch his breath before continuing, his voice cracking under the strain. "Since we have been flying for a long time, our destination could be beyond our reach, since we may lack sufficient fuel to get there." The finality of his confession hit the passengers like a physical blow, drawing the air out of the cabin as though the aircraft itself had inhaled a gasp of horror. Some cried out loud, others were paralyzed, their hands clenching armrests so hard that their knuckles whitened, as though through sheer force of will they could halt the unstoppable. A man grasped at his chest, his breathing shallow and fast, the first spasms of fear gripping his heart. The aircraft, once a sanctuary of order and technology, was now a prison of uncertainty. A metal coffin cutting through the emptiness at 500 miles an hour. Every flashing light, every jolt of turbulence seemed to foretell disaster. The whispers of fear were growing louder, building into a jarring buzz of terror. There were no strangers then, just the doomed, held together by the unspoken grasp of fear as they spoored toward some unknown destiny. And then another violent and convulsive shudder that ripped through the aircraft as if it had been seized in a death grip by an invisible hand. One of the engines coughed, sputtered, and died. The whole plane shuddered as if it had been hit by an invisible blow, a jolting crash of bone that threw passengers from their seats and sent loose objects flying through the cabin. The sickening lurch sent drinks crashing, trays falling to the floor, and overhead lockers bursting open, their contents spilling into the aisle. Gasps turned to screams as the cabin tilted, the aircraft going into an unnatural descent. The aircraft had already started to descend to New York, but now it was plummeting, no longer descending in a controlled manner, but spiraling out of control. The cabin lights flickered madly, casting crazed shadows on faces paralyzed with terror. The aircraft lurched violently, its damaged fuselage objecting to the stress. Oxygen masks dropped from the ceiling like ghostly apparitions, dangling inertly amidst the chaos. The cabin erupted into pandemonium. Screams of abject terror, cries for assistance, the raspy howls of those who recognized the inevitable. The night sky outside, once an endless expanse of stillness and silence, now pressed in like the walls of a closing tomb. The vastness had turned suffocating, a cosmic void ready to consume them. Below, the earth was no longer a distant haze, but a giant, looming thing, reaching out to snatch them with an appetite that threatened to consume them. City lights unfurled like streaks of flame, oblivious to the souls above, speeding towards their fate. The altimeter ticked down at a remorseless pace. The aircraft was still too far from New York City. Its decreasing altitude, a grim countdown, without reprieve. There were no longer any alternative airports, no deviations, just the relentless descent, and the understanding that hope was running through their fingers like sand in a gale. The cockpit was a maelstrom of confusion. Alarms screaming, warning lights flashing like a dying pulse. The aircraft strained against gravity, shuddering so violently the control panels creaked. The first officer's white-knuckled fists held tight to the yoke, his forehead beaded with sweat. His voice, strained and almost lost in the din of automated warnings, sliced through the chaos. The second engine coughed, sputtered, and with a final agonizing splutter, died in silence. A jolting stillness filled the cockpit, broken only by the otherworldly shriek of wind whistling past the fuselage. It was the kind of stillness that felt unnatural, deafening in its absence of power. A stillness that presaged catastrophe. The aircraft, a marvel of controlled engineering, was now reduced to a huge metal husk, a crippled glider flying through the darkness. The control panels blacked out, their frantic warnings muted, as if even the plane itself had given up. The first officer's breath caught, his fists still gripped on the dead yoke, as if sheer willpower could urge power back into the engines. His eyes bulged wide, darting to the altimeter, its numbers free-falling with heart-stopping speed. The first officer's knuckles turned white on the throttle. We're dead stick. No thrust. The captain's mind reeled. We can glide this in. His voice, which he tried to keep steady, trembled. He was not sure. It seemed to take forever for the Ram air turbine to deploy, its little turbine opening up into the howling wind like a desperate, last gasp prayer to the emptiness. Inside the cabin, The flight attendants strode down the aisles with stiff formality, their faces drawn but determined. Their voices, strained as they were, carried the authority of rehearsed command. "Brace for impact, please," one of them screamed, her voice hardly cutting through the noise. A few passengers complied at once, throwing themselves forward, arms clasped around their heads. Others were paralyzed, their brains locked in denial, unable to comprehend the unimaginable. One man struggled with his seatbelt, shaking so hard he couldn't locate the buckle. A woman clutched the armrest so hard her fingernails cracked on the plastic. The emergency lights strobed feebly, casting eerie shadows that twitched on faces contorted in terror. People shrieked, a loud, grating cacophony of terror. Some embraced their loved ones. Others slapped hands over their faces, screams muffled by the deafening quiet of the plummeting plane. A flight attendant, holding onto the back of a seat for balance, mouthed frantic reassurances no one heard. The aircraft vibrated heavily, the fuselage complaining in protest to the strain of its powerless plummeting. Unsecured items flew around the cabin, bouncing off chairs and people. Each passing second seemed impossibly long, as if the fabric of time itself had rent asunder under the threat of disaster. The captain gritted his teeth, his hands trembling over the controls. The glide of the plane was erratic, its path a hardly controlled plunge into the emptiness. The cockpit echoed with alarms, relentless, screaming their warnings in a cruel mockery of hope. Smoke from the failing systems wreathed through the dim light, the acrid scent of burning circuits searing his lungs. And then, out of the spinning darkness, out of the turmoil, he saw it, a faint, glimmering glow in the distance, cutting through the blackness like a sliver of salvation. New York City, runway lights, a fragile lifeline quivering in the fog, teasingly distant. But could they reach it? Or was it an illusion, a mirage in the final few seconds before extinction? The first officer's breath caught, his heart racing in his throat, as his eyes locked onto the gleaming light ahead. "We might make it, after all," he whispered, his voice trembling with a faint, desperate hope, as though saying the words aloud could make it so. But beneath his words was the unspoken fear, the knowledge that they were still at the mercy of gravity, the wind, and fate itself. But they hadn't reached there yet. The trees rose like shattered black shapes, their gnarled branches reaching out greedily toward the plane, as if to pull it down into nothingness. He had seconds. His grasp of the yoke was vice-like, his knuckles white under the faint glow of the flickering gauges. The plane bucked in an irregular motion that was wild, turbulence and gravity resisting every movement. His heart throbbed in his head, but his mind was fixed in steel-sharp concentration. The first officer took a deep breath. Hold it just a little longer. The branches on top of the trees were closing in. The runway lights continued to flicker ahead, teasingly near, yet impossibly distant. They were on the brink of salvation or doom. One last risk, one last wild maneuver. With a violent tug on the controls, he went for the gap. The tops of the trees scraped the underside of the plane, ripping at the undercarriage. The sound of metal on wood screamed through the cabin, and then a deafening, bone-crushing bang. A merciless cacophony of screaming metal and bursting steel, as if the heavens themselves had fallen. The force of impact vibrated through the fuselage, seats ripped from their mounts, bodies tossed around like dolls, flames licked along the broken edges of the aircraft, illuminating the darkness in an otherworldly, flickering glow. A choking cloud of smoke rolled through the wreckage, its acrid grip tightening around every strangling breath of air. The ground trembled with aftershocks, debris still creaking and groaning in the burning wreckage. Then, silence. A fragile, unnatural silence, shattered only by the crackles of fire and the rough, strained breathing of those who remained alive. There were cries from the rubble, some in the distance, some close, bare with pain and shock. The reek of smoldering petrol clung to the air, a bitter reminder of how close they had come to complete destruction. And when the smoke finally cleared, the twisted remains of the plane lay stretched out like a broken, tortured thing, its bare skeleton scarcely discernible as the great ship that it once was. And yet, despite all the odds, everyone was alive, poised between the salvation and oblivion, balanced on the brink of an impossible second chance. The captain, bruised and inexplicably alive, gaped as he released his harness, his sweat-soaked fingers shaking with aftershock. His ribs throbbed with searing pain, every breath a burning reminder of the savagery they'd just survived. He hauled himself up, vision fading, the metallic flavor of blood in his mouth. The debris lay before him like the scene of a nightmare. Flames licking across scorched metal. The bitter taste of fuel and smoke choking the air. Remote, tortured screams resounded in his mind, together with the ringing that had not stopped since impact. His head reeled, replaying every mistake, every warning he had ignored. The sign of his failure weighed upon him, more oppressive than the wreckage that enclosed him. He had made a mistake that should have killed everyone. The seeds of dominion. 1. I always knew the world was constructed on lies. Not minor falsehoods or innocent misunderstandings, but carefully cultivated fabrications designed to shape reality. From my earliest memories, even before my parents disappeared, I sensed that truth was not something freely given. It was deliberately hidden, erased, and rewritten. My parents were among the first to resist. They stood against the Dominion when resistance still felt possible, believing knowledge was a right worth risking everything to protect. They vanished when I was 6, quietly removed by the regime, their identities reduced to whispers and fading memories. Ronan and Elise Marek, old friends of my parents and former resistance fighters themselves, took me in. They taught me how to navigate the unseen currents beneath the surface, how to decode the hidden language of control the Dominion embedded in every broadcast and headline. They showed me the creeping corporate feudalism that had slowly replaced democracy as powerful corporations silently took ownership of entire districts, deciding who prospered and who disappeared. By 16, I was adept at uncovering secrets. I immersed myself in encrypted data streams and forgotten archives. Ronan and Elise warned me. Knowing too much was dangerous, but ignorance was deadly. The Dominion thrived because people feared the truth. They accepted convenience over freedom. My decision to become a journalist was calculated. It allowed me to move unnoticed, to gather information without drawing suspicion. Yet, deep down, I knew this was more than a career. It was a weapon against tyranny. Truth was powerful, but proof was lethal, too. You ever feel like you're chasing ghosts, Joran? I glanced up from my tablet, where Dominion data feeds ran endlessly, searching for cracks in their carefully constructed narratives. Devin Rains, my closest friend since our academy days, watched me from across the cafe table, worry shadowing his face. We chase ghosts because they're the only thing the Dominion fears, I replied evenly. Devin's discomfort was palpable, a subtle anxiety coloring every gesture. Recently, he'd changed. He'd grown cautious, hesitant. The war's been over for years, Devin said softly. Maybe they won because no one noticed until it was too late. Now, all we're doing is marking ourselves as targets. His words unsettled me, not for their truth, but because they were spoken from fear. Devin's courage had once matched mine, his idealism unwavering. Something had shifted. What's changed, Devin? I leaned forward, lowering my voice instinctively. Surveillance was everywhere, hidden in plain sight. He hesitated, eyes flicking nervously to the security camera mounted near the ceiling. There's a new list, he whispered. It's not for criminals or dissidents. It's for people who question too much. It's called the Inquiry List. I understood immediately. A blacklist was straightforward. Immediate punishment or exile. The Inquiry List was something darker, insidious. It marked you for isolation, slow erosion, and eventual disappearance. "You're on it," I stated flatly, watching him closely. He nodded slowly. "We both are." A silent understanding passed between us. Devon was frightened, and fear made people dangerous. Still, I wasn't about to stop. Not now, when the stakes had finally become clear. 3. Devon disappeared within days. His presence simply ceased. No messages, no records, no traces. Just silence. I pursued answers with relentless determination, hacking into secured archives, whispering in underground circles, piecing together fragments of his fate. Each revelation deepened my dread. The Dominion Protocol wasn't coming. It had arrived. Our world was now governed by rigid conformity, loyalty measured in unquestioning obedience. Citizens weren't people. They were assets, evaluated for their utility, discarded when inconvenient. I stared numbly at the evidence on my tablet. Democracy hadn't merely been undermined, it had been methodically dismantled. Devon wasn't dead, not physically. He had been absorbed, transformed into something compliant and controlled. 4. I knew when they would come. Patterns were easy to spot if you paid attention. Increased drone patrols, subtle shifts in daily broadcasts, neighbors becoming suddenly distant. It was all carefully staged. When the knock finally came, I was already on the move. Out through the fire escape, down silent alleyways, navigating shadows with practiced ease. My heart pounded, but my breathing remained steady. Panic was a luxury I couldn't afford. The train station loomed ahead, my gateway to the industrial underground. Passengers waited silently, their faces blank, eyes fixed firmly forward. I slipped onto the platform just as Dominion enforcers emerged, their armored presence imposing and inevitable. Joran Vale, the voice sent a chill down my spine. Not the enforcer's voice, but Devon's. I turned slowly, dread twisting inside me. Devon stood among them, dressed in Dominion black, his eyes hollow and distant. I recognized the vacancy instantly. The Dominion had taken not only his freedom, but his spirit. "Come quietly," he intoned, emotionless. "You gave in," I accused bitterly. "They made you afraid, and you surrendered." "I adapted," he replied mechanically. "No," I said sharply. "Adaptation isn't compliance." His gaze faltered, something brief and vulnerable flickering behind those empty eyes. Devon reached toward me, an automated reflex of the Dominion's control. The train doors hissed open beside me, a brief window of opportunity. Devon lunged, grabbing my shoulder. Instinct took over. I drove my elbow hard into his ribs, feeling him recoil sharply, gasping for breath. His grip loosened, and I wrenched free, leaping onto the train just as the doors snapped shut behind me. Through the window, Devon stared helplessly, now a shadow fading into the distance. Regret etched his features briefly before the darkness reclaimed him. The train surged forward, carrying me into uncertainty, but also toward freedom. 5. As the city lights blurred into a mosaic of neon and shadow, I steadied my breathing. The train hummed rhythmically beneath my feet, a steady reassurance that, for now, I was still free. Passengers around me stared blankly ahead, eyes purposely unfocused, trained to remain ignorant of anything that might threaten their carefully curated peace. But I was awake. The Dominion thrived on the apathy of the masses, believing control was absolute because compliance was easy. Yet beneath that facade lay a deep-seated fear of truth, a fragile illusion ready to shatter. I had lost Devon, just as I'd lost my parents. Each loss carved itself into my being. Painful reminders that truth always came at a cost. But their sacrifices were not in vain. They'd ignited a flame in me, nurtured by Ronan and Elise, a flame of resistance, a commitment to remember, to speak, and to expose the lies. The Dominion underestimated the strength of those who remembered, those who chose truth over comfort. They believed themselves untouchable, their rule eternal. But power built upon lies was fundamentally unstable, vulnerable to those willing to risk everything for the truth. As the train raced deeper into the industrial outskirts, darkness settled around me, punctuated only by flickering lights and distant shadows. I pressed my forehead gently against the cold window, eyes scanning the landscape rushing past. Factories loomed on the horizon, silent giants standing guard over secrets yet undiscovered. My heart steadied, determination hardening like tempered steel. They might hunt me, silence me, or erase my name from history, but they couldn't erase the truth, not while people like me still breathed. The Dominion hadn't won, not yet, on a parallel track, unnoticed. Another train moved quietly through the shadows. Inside, illuminated by the pale glow of a screen, a figure stared intently at my image, captured by surveillance cameras. Eyes narrowed thoughtfully, studying every detail of my escape, every gesture, every defiance. From the tinted window of his train car, Devon watched the darkness unfold, shadows reflecting in his eyes no longer hollow, but haunted by the flicker of something forgotten. He whispered softly to himself, a truth long buried, but impossible to erase. The truth is not a ghost, it is a weapon. And outside, the city faded slowly into darkness. The yellow truck. Man, $6 for an ice cream sandwich? Highway robbery. Jack squinted at the menu, slapped crookedly on the side of the bright yellow panel truck. Perry's ice cream. Everyone had a restaurant on wheels these days. Knockoffs of famous characters grinned back at him with their dead eyes. He knew the actual products would be a deformed, melted version of the picture, and he found the irregular eyeballs and melting smiles to be unsettling. A nice, plain ice cream sandwich would hit the spot. "Excuse me. Hello." Though the sliding sales window was open, Jack saw no sign of a vendor, even though the speakers puked out a chiptune version of La Cucaracha at top volume. "Are you going to take my money or what?" The chill from the freezers seeped out from the window. Jack leaned in a little further, noting the container of ice cream sandwiches that could be easily opened from his vantage point. He looked as far into the truck as he could see, then checked over his shoulder to see if he had an audience. The neighbors could be so nosy. With no one in sight, Jack quickly snaked his hand into the window, opened the container, and grabbed hold of a coveted ice cream sandwich. "Should have been doing your job, ice cream man," he mumbled as he walked back to his house, mouth full of ice cream and perfectly soggy cookie. He casually tossed the wrapper into his neighbor Mrs. Crowley's yard. Mrs. Crowley was the sort of woman everyone assumed was a witch, and the local kids would egg her house each Halloween and dare each other to ring her doorbell and run. She was probably a very nice lady, but Jack didn't care enough to do anything about it. The yellow truck sat on the street outside Jack's house for hours, rotating through its jaunty but very limited playlist, which, Jack noted, recycled La Cucaracha far more than was probably necessary. Jack considered calling the police, but with his record and at least one warrant out for his arrest, he didn't want to call any attention to himself. Still, he was surprised that no one else in the neighborhood seemed to have called. In fact, no one else in the neighborhood even seemed to pay the truck any mind. The sky eventually darkened, and the street lights buzzed on. And finally, the truck shut off its pixelated musical loop and trundled away. As night settled in, Jack, not wanting to lose the sweet and ill-begotten taste of ice cream from his lips, didn't bother to brush his teeth before crawling into bed. His leg was missing. Jack searched around the house, tossing couch cushions and overturning tables, flinging plates and mugs from his kitchen cabinets, even checking behind the toilet just in case. But no leg. He licked his lips, tasting the smooth vanilla cream from his earlier treat. Jack's brain fought to make a connection between the ice cream sandwich and his missing leg, but the thoughts were foggy and nebulous. The opening notes of La Cucaracha floated into the room. Jack launched upward, sweat pouring from his face as he shook off the nightmare. He tasted the residue of the ice cream on his lips, then flung the clammy sheets off his body to make sure his leg was, in fact, still there. La Cucaracha played in the distance, just audible through his open window. At first, Jack was able to dismiss the music as a memory echo from earlier, but the music grew louder, He lurched out of bed and towards the window, stopping to wrap his robe around himself so the neighbors wouldn't get a peek at his genitals if they happened to be awake, and also looking directly at his house. The familiar yellow panel truck was slowly turning onto his street, music playing at a volume just loud enough for him to hear clearly, but still retain a dreamlike quality. Jack had the strangest feeling. The headlights were aimed directly at him as the truck crept towards his house, an inching pace that was almost sinister. It was far too dark to see if a driver was present this time, but Jack assumed there was one. Jack shut the window, muting the noise just a touch, and tried to get back to sleep. The song slithered into his ears and brain, worming around and preventing him from falling back to sleep. He promised himself that he would give the driver a stern talking to in the morning if the truck were still parked outside his house. As the sun started to peak over the horizon, the music finally died down, and Jack stood in the window, watching the panel truck slowly crawl down the street. He hadn't bothered to grab his robe this time, but the fog of sleeplessness had settled over his brain. More than 1 cup of bitter, black coffee was necessary to get him ready for the ride to work. Slower reactions would make the commute more dangerous, he thought, snapping on his bike helmet. He cursed his revoked driver's license, unsteadily mounted the bike, and started pedaling. At each red light, Jack took a generous swig out of his travel mug, and by the time he sat down at his desk, he was wired. The sheer amount of coffee he drank that morning had agitated Jack's stomach, so he was looking forward to having solid food by the time noon rolled around. A little something to absorb all that coffee. He walked to his favorite sandwich shop, a tiny hole in the wall, a block or so down from his office. It was a checkered tablecloth affair, plus an easily accessible tip jar and an oblivious cashier, so he almost always broke even. The welcome bell chimed merrily as Jack opened the door, but the chimes didn't stop when the door closed. He paused, listening, then realized the notes formed a song. La cucaracha increased in volume, steadily, and Jack was too busy frowning at the noise to notice when the hostess greeted him. Sorry. Table for one, he told her, and she walked him to a booth by the window. Jack started to sit, but realized he could see the bright yellow panel truck pull awkwardly into the parallel parking spot directly in front of the diner. He sprang back, an odd fear clawing at his chest. Maybe a different table, he said. The hostess shrugged and pointed him to a table near the kitchen. Jack slumped down in a chair that still let him see out the window. The menu, still as maddeningly crooked as before, was fully visible from this vantage point, and Jack noted that though the sales window was open, no one was manning the counter. So Jack couldn't shake the feeling of being watched as he ordered his lunch chewed, drank, wiped his mouth with his flimsy paper napkin, paid at the counter, helped himself to the tip jar, and walked out the door. Every move soundtracked by the tinny tunes pumping out of the truck's speaker. No one had approached the counter to buy an ice cream the entire lunch hour. His muscles relaxed as he walked back to his building. The more the music faded with distance, the better he felt. He hadn't even noticed he was so tense. Jack rolled his neck around, rotated his shoulders, and was just about to reach the automatic doors to his office when he heard it again. The 8-bit notes of La Cucaracha increased in volume behind him, and he swung around, fists raised and heart beating rapidly. His boss, who had been walking up immediately behind him, backed up. "Whoa! Whoa! Jack!" Treating Jack like a panicked horse had, presumably, his boss's desired effect. And Jack put his fists down. "What's got you all spooked? Bad sandwich?" His boss chuckled, and then breezed past Jack into the office. Still on the sidewalk, Jack caught a flash of yellow down the block. He didn't wait to see the truck this time, and rushed inside. Jack was waiting, rather impatiently, to cross the street on his way home when a shiver ran up his spine. He looked over his shoulder, and his stomach seized. The yellow ice cream truck was also in line at the stoplight, just 3 car lengths away. It wasn't playing the music, but Jack thought he could hear it all the same. Jack wasn't completely sure that the truck was following him, specifically as he cycled through the neighborhood, but with each turn, he became more and more convinced. The truck kept a slow speed and stayed a modest distance behind his bike, far lower than the posted speed limit. He stopped at the cluster mailbox at the top of his street, mostly to check the mail, but also to see if the ice cream truck would keep driving. The truck slowed to a halt a few yards from the mailboxes, the staccato sounds still aggressively worming its way into Jack's brain. Jack fiddled with the mailbox key and took an unnecessary amount of time inspecting each piece of mail, even the junk. But the ice cream truck still didn't move. And Jack stared directly at the driver's side of the windshield. It was so tinted that he was still unable to tell if anyone was in the driver's seat at all. He flipped the bird, just in case, and got back on his bike. As he started pedaling the short distance to his house, the truck started following again. A few houses down from his own, Jack heard the truck accelerate. His heart thumping, he quickly looked back to confirm that, yes, the ice cream truck was speeding up and heading his way. He checked his surroundings for a safe place to duck behind, but only Mrs. Crowley's rose bushes offered any sort of protection. He darted towards the bushes, abandoning his bike and hurling himself into the roses in one semi-graceful movement that would have made a movie stuntman proud. The thorns bit into his skin, and one scratched dangerously close to his left eye. The truck had missed him, but Jack heard the screech of brakes. Jack painfully extricated himself from the rose bushes, and the ice cream truck still idled in the road. La Cucaracha, blaring incessantly. The back door of the truck swung open with a creak. "Hey!" Jack yelled, wiping blood from his face, only to realize he also had blood on his hands and lots of other places because of the thorns. He lurched towards the back of the truck, his left leg dragging slightly. It would be bruised in the morning, he thought. "Hey, I'm talking to you, asshole!" Jack rounded the back of the truck and leaned on the open door. No one was inside. Through a narrow break in the curtains, Mrs. Crowley observed Jack as he yelled at the ice cream truck. He had always been an odd duck, that Jack. Terribly messy. And just the other day, he had been standing at his window in the middle of the night with only a robe on. She had almost seen his genitals. Mrs. Crowley couldn't make out exactly what Jack was yelling, but she imagined it was full of swearing. He started to lean into the open back of the truck, and then, in an instant, he was yanked inside. Before his legs made it all the way across the bumper, the doors of the truck slammed shut with such force that Jack's left leg was severed at the knee. The bloody leftovers dropped unceremoniously to the pavement and rolled to the curb. High-pitched notes of La Cucaracha distorted with static, and the truck shuddered violently. Mrs. Crowley took a tiny sip of her tea and watched the menu sign spin as the truck convulsed. With one last tremble, the truck stilled and the spinning sign stopped. The music had changed, and so had the sign's content. "Perry's Hamburgers," it read. Still crooked, the truck slowly crept down the street, and she pinched her curtains shut. Nowhere to be found. "Timothy, sit down and shut up. Don't make me tell you again." "But Dad, I want to see how far I can jump." "Sit down." "But Dad..." "Not here. Not now. Don't do this to me, Tim." The father exhales sharply, pressing 2 fingers to his temple. 3 hours. That's all he's asking for. 3 quiet, uneventful hours from Perth to Adelaide. No screaming kids. No feet kicking his chair. No running up and down the aisles. More specifically, could the one causing havoc please not be his own? Timothy crosses his arms, sulking. Flying is boring. Why couldn't they go somewhere fun, like Hollywood or Africa? Why did it always have to be Adelaide? Grandma would pinch his cheeks, and Dad would sit around drinking port with Grandpa. Their house smelled funny, and now he couldn't even test how far he could jump on an airplane. He shifts in his seat, eyes scanning the rows of passengers ahead. The seatbelt light is off. Maybe if he's quick, the father sighs, pinching the bridge of his nose. Timothy, I swear to God. He turns to his son's seat. It's empty. A second passes. Another. The father blinks. The air feels suddenly thick. He turns his head slightly, expecting to see Timothy crouching in the aisle, giggling. Nothing. His gaze darts to the seats ahead, searching for the flash of a child's movement. His pulse quickens. Tim, no response. The father unbuckles his seatbelt, scanning the cabin. Timothy isn't anywhere in sight. He grips the armrest, forcing a breath through clenched teeth. It's fine. It's a game. He stands up. Timothy. A few heads turn. A flight attendant passing by pauses. Sir? My son, he says quickly. He's not in his seat. She glances at the empty spot beside him. Perhaps he went to the restroom? No, he wouldn't. Not without saying something. Not without whining about having to go. The father moves toward the nearest lavatory, knocking hard. Timothy? No answer. He presses the button. The door pops open. Empty. A cold knot forms in his stomach. He checks the other lavatory. Then the one at the front. Then the one at the back. Nothing. His pace quickens. His breath turns shallow. He pulls open the overhead lockers, searching for... what? A hiding child? He doesn't know. He just knows Timothy isn't in his seat. Timothy isn't anywhere. He weaves through the rows, scanning every face, stopping at every child. No. 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 The flight attendant approaches again, concern in her eyes. Sir, my son, he says, more forcefully now. He's missing. A ripple of murmurs spreads through the cabin. Another attendant joins the first. One of them touches his arm lightly. We'll help you look. Passengers glance up, some confused, others disinterested. A man 2 rows back frowns and mutters, I didn't see a kid sitting there. The father's head jerks toward him. What? The man shrugs. I mean, I just don't remember seeing a kid. Thought you were alone. The father stares. His vision narrows. His heartbeat pounds against his skull. What the fuck are you trying to do? Did you have something to do with this? The man drops his head, regretting getting himself involved. Sir, one of the attendants says, please stay calm. Let's retrace everything. Your son was in his seat after takeoff? Yes. And when did you last see him? Just now. Seconds ago. His voice is shaking. He doesn't care. I was talking to him. I turned away for 1 second, and he swallows. He's gone. More passengers are watching now. Some look concerned. Some exchange glances. The father scans every face, searching for suspicion, guilt, anything. His breathing grows uneven. This isn't happening. Someone took him. Someone on this plane has his son. The attendants begin a quiet, methodical search. One asks passengers if they've seen a small boy. Most shake their heads. Some barely look up from their screens. The father doesn't wait. He moves faster, yanking back curtains, peering into crew areas, shoving open every unlocked door. The attendants murmur into radios. The plane feels smaller now, tighter. He searches again and again. Every seat, every row, every corner, nothing. His hands shake. His face is burning. He moves up the aisle, scanning the faces again. Who took him? A woman reaches out gently. Sir, please. Timothy, the father shouts, voice cracking. Heads snap toward him. Timothy, answer me. Nothing. His pulse pounds in his ears. He stumbles down the aisle, knocking against armrests. Tim. His voice is raw now, desperate. Timothy, where are you? He reaches the cockpit door, slams his fist against it. My son is missing. Someone has my son. The attendants pull him back, whispering reassurances that mean nothing. He shoves past them, back down the aisle. He checks the bathrooms again. He knows he already did. He does it anyway. He pulls down tray tables, looks under seats. Passengers murmur. Some watch with unease. Others look away. The man who said Timothy wasn't there stares at him blankly. The father stares back, fists clenching. He opens his mouth. But what does he say? That the man is lying? That his son was here, right here, and now he isn't? That his world is collapsing, and no one understands? Sir? An attendant says softly. Please sit down. The father sways on his feet. His head is pounding. Then, a shift. A sensation. The slight pressure in his gut. They are descending. No, the plane is landing. His breaths turn shallow. He turns toward the window. The ground grows closer. No, no, no. He grips the seat in front of him. His knuckles go white. Timothy is still missing. The wheels touch the runway. The plane slows. The overhead chime dings. Timothy is still missing. The seat belts click open. People stand. Timothy is still missing. The doors open. Light floods in. Timothy is still missing. The other passengers are standing now. The overhead lockers are popping open. Timothy is still missing. They have their bags and pushing past him. Exiting the plane, Timothy is still missing. He is the last one now. Sir, we need you to please exit the aircraft. The authorities have been alerted and are waiting to assist you in the terminal. Timothy is still missing. Where is my son? Wing woman. God, I hate flying. I look out the window of the 747, so foolishly boarded in my rush to get cross-country as quickly as possible. We are flying through some dark clouds, so there is little to see. The old, familiar fear rises in the pit of my stomach as I try to push it back. I have to maintain myself. Don't start to panic. Nothing's going to happen. I try to flood myself with calm, even as I'm white-knuckling the armrest. The 4 Jack Daniels I had before the flight aren't working. The plane is shaking a little bit. I get it. I am a nervous flyer myself. The stranger next to me smiles reassuringly, but her voice doesn't sound nervous at all. I never liked it and avoid it whenever I can. Cars or buses are safer. She chuckles. You do know that's not what they say. Who says? The experts, of course. You can't trust them. What makes them experts anyway? My face feels hot and flushed. Am I turning red? Well, they say flying is much safer than driving. Thousands dead every year from cars, but no fatal plane crashes in the United States for several years now. She's trying to calm me, but I've heard it all before. Don't believe a word. I know. I've heard all of that. But it just takes one plane to crash, and over 100 dead, just like that. What if it's this plane? I can feel it shaking. Is my voice trembling? I don't want her to notice and think I'm a coward. Hell, I am afraid. It's embarrassing for her to see it. Her face shows concern. Or is it contempt? I'm not sure. She's middle-aged, but still in good shape. And pretty. It's all right. Don't worry. Planes do all kinds of different things in flight. A little shaking is perfectly normal. I fly quite a bit, and no. You must think me a real loser for being so frightened, and you're so calm. Oh, I'm not calm, just a good actress. She teases. What's your name? Charles? But my friends call me Charlie. Well, Charlie, I'm Rachel. But my friends call me Rachel. She smiles and extends a slender hand. Because my hand is sweaty and a little shaky, I hesitate momentarily to return her handshake, but overcome my reluctance. She doesn't seem to notice or care about the condition of my hand. Where are you headed? I ask. To Dallas. I have a job in marketing, so I do a fair amount of traveling. But I still understand the nervousness. Never feel quite calm till the plane touches down and stops moving. I can't tell you are nervous at all. Like I said, Charlie, I'm good at acting the part of a calm, cool, and in control flyer. Perfected the part, you might say. How about you? Where you headed? Family crisis. My mom is in bad shape, and I have to head to a small town about 100 miles outside of Dallas and get there quickly. Otherwise, I'd never be on this death trap. I smile, trying to make a little joke of my fear. Sorry to hear that, Charlie. I hope she gets well soon. So do I. But the doctors say the odds are against her. So this might be my last visit. I have to tell myself that as long as there is life, there's hope. God, I'm sorry. I lost my father about a year ago. It's horrible to go through. Our conversation is interrupted by a few particularly bigger bumps than the previous ones. After the shaking stops, her demeanor seems to change, and she sounds a little different when she resumes talking. Charlie, I feel bad for you. Not only are you having to deal with your mom's illness, but then you have to brave this shaky flight. I thought you said a little shaking was normal. Well, a little shaking at times is normal. She gets a little closer to me and lowers her voice a bit. However, to be truthful, This flight is a little more bouncy than usual, but I'm still not that concerned yet. What happened to projecting the fearless businesswoman? My fear level is rising again. Sorry. I guess I just feel more comfortable with you. I usually sit next to people who are totally fearless. They will hide stoically through the bumpiest of flights, showing no emotion, while I am churning inside, but still projecting my calm exterior. But with you, I can be real. It's liberating. Her slightly moist hand finds mine and squeezes it slightly. It's comforting to have a fellow passenger reveal her inner anxiety to me. We are companions in fear, friends of anxiety. Don't worry. It's nice to know I'm not the only one. Sometimes I feel that I can't even talk about it without people giving me all the statistics about how safe flying is and how foolish my concerns. I smile at her. Our inside joke. She softly laughs. You got me, Charlie. I was overcompensating, I guess. What can I say? Hope you don't think I am a pure hypocrite. Hypocrite? Heaven forbid. Just a good actress. Oh my, Charlie. Flattery will get you everywhere. She bravely says, but her hand pressure gives her away. More ups and downs, and more bumping now. Worse than anything before it. Quickly, the fasten seat belt's lamp comes on, and the captain's voice comes over the loudspeaker, telling us we are experiencing a little unexpected turbulence, but there is nothing to worry about. Talk about acting. Do these guys train in how to project a confident and reassuring voice? Or what? I'm not believing him at all. There's got to be something wrong. Otherwise, why the seatbelt light and message from the captain? Why the ever-increasing bumping? The engines don't sound right at all. This isn't how engines should sound. Are they cutting out? Losing power? Are we losing altitude? I look over at Rachel. There is fear in her face now. Our sweaty hands are in a death grip. I'm so glad she's here with me. Little Men, January 1985. Somewhere over the... You were 1,000 miles into the Atlantic when the aircraft rutted violently against your controls. Barely a shiver in the airframe at first, like a deep sigh running through the metal bones of the 777, then unloading at once. You felt it beneath your hands, fingers curled around the yoke, a pulse of tension radiating from your own chest. And you thought that perhaps the bottom of the ocean was where you belonged. There was a darkness there, a pressure so strong it would stop your body from behaving like a biological machine and turn it into a mangled physics experiment. The same coexisted inside you, where your heart was splintered, half of it belonging to your mother and half of it to Cammy. A darkness you couldn't smooth away. Somewhere back there, among the rows of passengers dozing, sighing, and flipping through their lives, he was sitting. Your father, a man you'd never truly seen. Not beyond the stories your mother whispered in moments of quiet fury. A man who had given you nothing but a sickness that curled in your gut when you remembered where you came from. The man whose rage marked you. You didn't know his seat number, didn't want to know. The knowledge that he existed in your cabin, breathing your air, was enough to make a grown man sick. And you thought you knew that if he walked up to the cockpit door, if he knocked, if he leaned in with some pathetic excuse or a father's smirk, you would open the door and wrap your hands around his throat. You'd feel his pulse flutter against your fingers, fragile and real, and you would squeeze. You let autopilot hold the course. Let the gentle hum of the engines seep into your bones, pretending for a moment you were something better than what he left behind. A clean slate, but there was always a stain, that borrowed darkness, his gift to you. No matter how high you flew, you couldn't outrun it. And then she drifted into your mind, the girl with eyes like sky break, a voice like gentle rain, the girl you had never touched, could never touch, because she was flawless in ways you would never be. She'd smile at you with that easy grace, unaware of the shadows clawing inside you, oblivious to the storm you kept locked behind your ribs. You thought of her seeing you for what you were, the quiet, steady pilot with a monster curled around his heart. If she knew, if she saw even a hint of that darkness, she would recoil. She'd wish you out of the sky, wish your plane would disappear into the ocean without a trace. And maybe she'd be right. The horizon stretched before you, a line you couldn't cross, a future you didn't deserve. You swallowed the air in shallow breaths, felt the press of your father's existence. Outside, the clouds thickened, gray swirling into black, and the gentle tremor of turbulence returned. The seatbelt sign blinked on. You flicked the intercom switch, cleared your throat. Ladies and gentlemen, we're passing through some rough air. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. Your father's life was in your hands. All their lives were. You looked at the yoke, the screens, the clouds ahead, and wondered just how far you could fall before the darkness took over. Why was he still alive? How did he deserve to be alive? On what grounds exactly? You could push the controls forward, put the nose into a dive, select full thrust, increase bank angle to 45 degrees, and stall the plane. Keep putting in fatal commands while your FO tries to right the plane until the dual input sound warning starts to ring out through the cockpit. You squeezed your eyes shut just for a moment. The stick trembled beneath your fingers, the aircraft groaning. You loved this plane, and like in any other reciprocal relationship, it not only loved you back, but supported your every decision. You could do it. A simple motion, a nudge of the yoke, the push of a throttle, and gravity would take over. You opened your eyes. Outside, the storm coiled tighter, wind shear slipping along the fuselage. The intercom crackled as your first officer, blissfully unaware of the war inside you, mumbled something about altitude adjustments. You barely heard him. A breath, another. Then the master caution blared. A harsh, shrieking thing. Your FO jerked upright. Jesus, what? Your hands moved. Instincts taking over before your mind could finish what it started. The turbulence sharpened. Wind punched the aircraft broadside. The nose dipped. Pitch up, pitch up. You corrected without thinking. Muscle memory overriding the dark pull at the edge of your mind. The aircraft stabilized, shuddering in the air, and for a moment, all was still. Your FO exhaled, dragging a hand down his face. That was a bad one. You okay? You nodded, throat dry. Yeah, you said, because it wasn't your hands that tried to kill them. It was the storm. At least, that was the lie you would tell yourself. Something in you had hesitated, had listened to the alarms, had heard the raw panic in your FO's voice, had responded like the pilot they had trained you to be. Why had you stopped? Captain, you forced your expression into something normal, professional. The storm was beginning to ease, the worst of it passing. We'll be clear in a few minutes, you said. Keep an eye on the readings. He nodded, rubbing his temples. Didn't think we'd get rocked that hard. Thought for a second we were gonna. He shook his head. Never mind. You didn't respond. Instead, you reached for the intercom. Your voice was calm, steady. Everything it should be. Ladies and gentlemen, the turbulence is subsiding. We'll have a smooth ride the rest of the way. Thank you for your patience. You let go of the button. The lie sat heavy in your mouth because the storm wasn't over. It had only just begun.